play the sounder.
The Scouting Report.
Whoa. All right, it's time to get an in-depth look at a particular class and spec from a very knowledgeable source, and we have one for you today. This week, he's taking time out from heroic progression rating from one of the top guilds in the world, Blood Legion. Here to talk to us about balanced druids today is Zoomkins. Zoomkins, welcome to the show.
Hey, how you doing? I'm glad to be here.
Good.
I love talking to the community and helping people out all the time.
Good.
So I just love to go and do this.
Awesome. Well, we're psyched to have you on the show, man. It's going to be good. It's going to be good. Solar Flare, I know that you had some questions before we really get going on balanced druids, though. Is that right?
Yeah, I do. I wanted to talk to you just a second about heroic progression, especially this tier. A lot of people are confused, and I had a question for you. What do you really think classifies world first finish on this tier? Is it going to be killing Raw Den, or is it with Lei Shen, who was really the last boss before it became optional? Who do you think really is going to nab that in terms of who is getting world first?
Well, like always, the whole thing about finishing the race has always been like completing every single boss in a sense. So since Raw Den is still up, everyone's still talking about it in like kind of a completion of a tier. But there have been many blue posts in the past where they talk about Lei Shen as kind of like their go-to fight this tier, where they said, they've worked on it extensively. It was one of the hardest fights that they designed. And it's really, really challenging. Still is really challenging. But yeah.
So
I still think a lot of people consider that when Raw Den is dead, that, it's 100% completion and then progression's completely over. Because that's when people are going to be taking their week breaks.
Right.
But it is a lot easier with the 30 attempts thing, because even though right now, like, there's Paragon and Method who are finished with Lei Shen, they're going to be taking it easy because with just the 30 attempts, you can raid your normal hours at that point and just put in like a couple attempts, sit there and talk about strategies for the night or something, and then do like another 2 or 3 or something the next day.
Sure. Well, and how's it been going for Blood Legion with Lei Shen?
Without giving too much away, I know some of it's on lockdown.
I don't want to talk about strats at all. I mean, I'm just talking about how many pulls are you guys doing, and how goes the fight?
Well, yeah, like I can say some stuff, but since we're still on it, I can't say all too much.
Sure.
But I heard you guys for a few seconds, like just when I just popped on, you guys were talking about heroic rag. Yeah, it has pretty much reached heroic rag levels at this point. Just looking at the pull counts from like some of the other guilds and our guild, we're reaching like crazy numbers at this point.
Sure. How many?
That's awesome.
How many pulls have you done on him? I mean, roughly.
I don't know, like a few hundred at this point.
Wow.
But it's kind of crazy because like a lot of other guilds have pulled those numbers, but in like half the time that we have.
Sure.
I mean, a lot of the guilds have different strategies and methods on like how they, like start and approach bosses. And, I think, I don't know, sometimes our pull count's like a little bit lower for most, but at this point it's been reaching like pretty high. Like it's very easy to wipe on that boss and just have to pull again. So the numbers are just immense for a lot of the guilds.
That's awesome. I had a quick question. I mean, we are talking right now about heroic level progression. Have you been satisfied with this this raid tier? Have you enjoyed Throne of Thunder? Is there a challenge?
Oh, yeah. I like Lei Shen, like they advertise. It's pretty much one of, like the really, really challenging fights this tier. They have a lot of like very, very interesting mechanics into it. There's a lot of, I like a lot of the previous fights too. It really has been a very smooth progression. Like a lot of the early fights were pretty easy, which was, how they intend for it to be. And then a lot of the later ones, like once you get up to Dark Animus, Primordius and such, it the skill level on the fights like increases like tenfold, which is pretty interesting to see. That's why you saw like a lot of guilds were stuck on like a lot of those fights for a while.
Yeah, Dark Animus looks pretty intense. I mean, just even on normal mode. I mean, it seems kind of like, oh my God, I have to do math? What's going on? So, I mean, there are some crazy fights going on, that's for sure.
Oh yeah, Dark Animus could have been done a multitude of different ways, which is what they really intended. But it's just kind of funny to see sometimes that a lot of guilds went for the exact same strategy without really talking to each other, because no one's really feeding each other, like strats or whatnot.
Sure.
But we all gravitated towards, the exact same way mathematically, which was really, really interesting to see.
Cool.
Where we all used, like 2 massives and didn't really use any larges at all, if you've done the fade so far.
Right. So I'm guessing that with 300 pulls or hundreds of pulls on Lei Shen, the team dynamic is still going strong. Still, guys are pumped up to finally down this guy.
Oh yeah, definitely. But we also do have Easter, and a lot of people are going out with their families. So sometimes that can hinder things. We've also seen that with previous tiers when progression comes around, like Christmas and stuff. People, like it's a big holidays, like here in the U.S. and stuff like that. People still go out, and do stuff with their families and whatnot. And then there are the people who, like are living on their own or somewhere out, so not even close to friends that still want to raid and play 24/7.
Sure. Well, and you saw
it's
that
hard
with
to get all 25 of those people around.
You saw that with Thanksgiving, right? Because that was when the heroics came out for the 5.0 raids, I believe, and it was during Thanksgiving week. So
yeah, it was the exact same thing. It happens with holidays a lot of times. So that's one hindrance, and that's one big hard part about 25 man in itself. I mean, that happens pretty often.
Right.
I have to wonder too, are you guys in a way kind of frustrated? Because when you're doing this type of progression, it's pretty much you're raiding like 24/7. Is there a level of frustration because, like, gosh, let's get these guys down. We need to take a break. I got to resume my normal life here. Is that pretty crazy?
How's Riggs holding up?
He's all right. It's just this tier has also been kind of a long haul too. Like a lot of the bosses did take a while.
Gotcha.
I think we're approaching like 3-4 weeks at this point.
Right. Yeah. That's a long time.
Yeah, it definitely has been. Like the difference from the previous tier to this one though was last tier they released everything gated, so it was more or less like, okay, it's 1 week's of normals, then 1 week of hardcore raid progression. So we'd raid for like 4 or 5 days, we'd get most of it done, and then it'd be a week of normals again, and then we raid for like 4 or 5 days. So it was like an on and off thing, which was really hard to schedule around. But this time, like people took like 2 or 3 weeks of vacation off, which is, what a lot of people that are doing hardcore progression kind of plan for. And then after that, now we're just kind of, trying to work around people's school and work schedules, because it's not a pace you can really keep up forever. Is the thing.
Really? You can't keep that up forever?
Yeah.
Let's go. Come on, guys. All right, well, let's talk about Balanced Druids. I mean, you've been playing Balanced Druid for a long time, right?
Yeah, I've pretty much started back in Burning Crusade. I started off the game playing as a rogue, and then just the class itself kind of attracted me and whatnot, just because of the fun little Moonkin form. But since then, I've been theory crafting it and playing it at a relatively high level. So,
a relatively high level.
Yeah, at the beginning, wasn't always in Blood Legion, but
one of the top 5 guilds in the world. All right, yeah, sure, just a moderately high level. So what do you like about Zoomkins? Really?
Well, the class itself has changed so much, and it's like still ever evolving. Because I remember, a few years back, they didn't even have like the Eclipse system, which is now in.
Right.
But I think it's, even though it doesn't seem as complicated when you first start out, it like kind of grows with you, because you have to use this marriage of the second resource with the procs that you get. And I don't know, it can be played a multitude of different ways. Like, you're not really 100% bad on any fight. You just have to change how you're playing it and how you're using the spec.
Gotcha. Well, let's talk a little bit about the spells and about what you're using on a regular basis, especially with let's say we do a single boss fight like Jinrock or something like that. What are you using from the pull all the time? What are those different spells?
Yeah, so like right now, Balance has like 1 or 2 tiers that really make the class, in a sense. 2 damaging tiers where you have On one tier, it's Incarnation, Force of Nature, and Soul of the Forest.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever you pick from there makes a big difference on what you pick with the next tier, which is Heart of the Wild,
Dream of Cenarius and
Dream
Nature's...
of Cenarius, and Nature's Vigil.
Yeah.
Sorry. So something like Jin Rock, where it's a fight where you have a damage amp, and the damage amp is coming like every minute and some change. You're going to want to pick like your two big damage cooldowns. So you're going to pick something like Incarnation and Nature's Vigil. When you stack those together, it's going to stack multiplicatively with the damage amp. And if you're able to do it, because you're only doing your big source of damage when you have that damage amp.
Sure.
So you're going to pick those two. You're going to use it whenever you're in a puddle, and then you're going to get Nature's Vigil, which is 1.5 minutes, probably like pretty much every puddle. Okay. So stuff like that is like, depending on what fight you're doing, you're going to pick different types of cooldowns.
Sure. That makes a lot of sense.
I'm curious myself, real quick, especially actually in regards to rotation. There's a lot of Boomkins out there that are playing the Boomkins. They're not really sure, what to do. What do I cast first? What do I cast next? If you don't mind, what is a typical rotation for a boomer? Like when that fight starts, what do you do?
Well, like a lot of times too, you have to have started in what we call like a pre-lunar, which a lot of people do. You use your Astral Communion, which is kind of really fun, which they just added, which is a spell that, lets you set your eclipse energy at any point before a fight starts. So you'd start like 70 energy off lunar eclipse. From there, you're going to have Starfall off cooldown. So you're going to start the fight. You're going to use Starfall. You're going to cast one Wrath. You're going to go into lunar eclipse, which resets your Starfall. So you're going to second one there. Then you're going to be putting up both of your dots, just using Star Surge on cooldown from that point. Starfire, and then you're going to get a third Starfall when you use your Celestial Alignment, which is also one of your 3-minute cooldowns. So starting off the fight like that is kind of like one of the most important things you can do, because you're going to be lining up 2 of your 3-minute cooldowns with your Eclipse energy like perfectly, and that's where you're going to spike up to like 500, 600,000 DPS depending on your gear. And getting that opener off like perfectly is kind of the biggest parts of the fight. And then that, however you start that, it lines up later on too. I actually have some little videos like that on my YouTube and whatnot that kind of like explain it, like visually, because it's kind of hard to explain sometimes if you don't know it all the like the little lingo of the class too.
Right.
Where can listeners go to get your YouTube? What's your channel handle?
I can give you a link on set. But yeah, I could go in on this pretty much all day. So,
well, let's talk about Eclipse, just in general, as a mechanic. Do you find that you're going back and forth? Is it essentially a yo-yo between solar eclipse and lunar eclipse at that point after you get off of the initial pull?
Yeah, pretty much. Like, if you go down to your damage breakdown a lot while you're playing, you're going to see it's pretty much like a roller coaster. You're going to be dealing like amazing damage when your eclipse is up, and then you're pretty much yo-yoing until you get into your next eclipse.
So when you hit those eclipses, what are you doing to make sure that you get the most out of them?
Well, a lot of times you have Sunfire and Moonfire. So like when you're in lunar eclipse, it buffs all of your arcane damage that you're doing, and that includes Starfall, Moonfire, and Starfire. So, and Star Surge, of course, does damage from both schools.
Okay.
So every time you hit an eclipse, you're going to have one dot that is buffed with a damage amp from eclipse. So you're going to make sure that you're trying to prioritize that dot, because a Moonkin's biggest strength is on fights where there's, say, 2 to 3 adds. Anything beyond that, you're going to kind of fall off because other classes are better at huge multi-target AoE. But for a Moonkin, your largest strength in a fight would be, say, something like Horadon, where, there's a boss and then there's like 2 or 3 adds up, maybe sometimes 4, but you're just going to be, say, like I start off the fight, I'm in solar eclipse. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put up both my dots on the boss because he needs to die, like prioritized. And then I'm going to be putting up Moonfire. I'm not going to do Moonfire and Sunfire on all the other ads. I'm just going to prioritize Moonfire because it's eclipsed at that point. So it's going to be buffed by, say, 50-something%, depending on your mastery. And then I'm going to just be using Starfire until I hit Solar Eclipse. And then when I hit Solar, it's the same thing. I'm going to be prioritizing putting up my Sunfire instead of the Moonfire up on all the targets. You don't necessarily want to put both dots up on all the targets that you can. You want to prioritize the Eclipse dot, which is one thing a lot of people don't really realize, and they try to put up both dots on all the targets instead of just prioritizing the one. For the same GCD, it's going to do way more damage.
Right. I actually kind of picture, now that we have a fight that's kind of like this with Sulong, I kind of picture Boomkin as kind of the same, right? I mean, because you have like your night spells and then you have your daytime spells. So it's kind of cool in that respect.
Yeah, they kind of keep that theme a lot with the names of all the abilities.
Right.
It's like a bowl of Lucky Charms at this point with stars, hearts, and horseshoes. And
right. But what you said earlier too is true. You're changing your rotation based on your eclipses. If it's going to the right, then you're using this dot. If it's going to the left, then you're using that dot.
Yeah, it's kind of a lot you have to think of on the fly. One of the biggest dynamics too, which is something that they changed a lot, is every time you hit an eclipse, you get a buff called Nature's Grace, which increases your haste by 15%. And that's one of the biggest things you have to watch, because like Moonkin as a class, every rating is good for you, and you scale off ratings immensely. And that's why we do things like we stack crit at this point. But haste is also pretty much just as good, but it's just the fact that crit is slightly better on multi-target fights because of your dots. So the haste proc that you get every time you reach an eclipse, you have to make sure you're using it to its maximum, because if you put up dots without that, haste buff on you, they're going to tick slower, and you're going to get a lot less star surges and just a lot less damage overall.
Right on.
So you're having to transfer eclipse to eclipse no matter what. You can't just stop and sit in one forever, because if you do, you're just going to lose a huge chunk of damage.
Now, I have a Boomkin. I mean, nowhere. It's hardly even geared, but I always tried to learn the rotation on it. The one thing that confused me was Star Surge procs during the seesaw back and forth between lunar and solar. Do you just use the procs immediately as they come up, or do you save them because it changes the energy and all? How did you work the procs of Star Surge?
Yeah, see, that's where a lot of this, what to do or what not to do comes in. It can be kind of like confusing, because there's a lot of small things you can do as Moonkin to increase your damage. Because at first, people are just, you use Wrath to go from solar to lunar, use Starfire to go from lunar to solar, just in the small sense, it's pretty easy. But then once you get into the high end, like for, all classes, that's when it starts to become decision making. So when you use, when you're out of Eclipse, your Wrath and Starfire and Star Surge generate more Eclipse energy. So the bar goes in the middle, 0 to 100 for either side. So say I use a Wrath at 100 solar energy, it's only giving me, I think, 15 at this point. So when you leave Eclipse, it's going to be giving you 30. When you use a Star Surge out of Eclipse, it's going to be giving you 40. So you kind of have to like watch the numbers and use it, when it's mathematically better for you.
Right. So it wouldn't really make sense to use a Star Surge proc at, say, like 95 energy, right?
Yeah, a lot of times if you're one cast or, like one or two casts away, you would want to sit on the Star Surge till you get into your next Eclipse.
Right.
But there also are occasions where, say, like I'm going from solar to lunar and I have 60 energy out of Eclipse, then that one Star Surge is just going to push me over instead of doing two whole casts. So it's kind of like that numerical value you got to watch. And also it depends on if you have, say, a multitude of targets dotted, you're just going to want to use your Star Surges on cooldown no matter what energy. Because say like I have 3 targets fully dotted up, I'm going to be gaining Star Surge procs like crazy, like depending on your level of gear, because any one of those, 6 dots could be critting like at any point. And you can lose procs, and you might as well, use a Star Surge instead of losing one. Right. Because they can happen while you have the proc just sitting up.
So the more dots you have, the more Star Surge procs you can get. So just go for it.
The more, yeah. just fucking shoot out a volley.
Right on. Right on. So now, what other types of pro tips can you give our listeners as far as like some really good ways to increase your DPS with a crit chicken?
Well, like one thing too is just talking about, it's all about managing your cooldown rotation, which is one thing people have to learn. I mean, Incarnation is a 3-minute cooldown. Celestial Alignment is a 3-minute cooldown. Incarnation's 30 seconds. Celestial Alignment's 15 seconds. So you're going to be starting off in an Eclipse. You're going to use your Incarnation, which buffs your Eclipse damage. Then when you have 15 seconds left on Incarnation, that's when you're going to use a Celestial Alignment, because you want to be in an Eclipse the entire 30 seconds that you're using, that buff. So extending that time with Celestial Alignment is the marriage of the two abilities, which a lot of people at this point know. But yeah, the best way to improve your damage on fights, which a lot of people don't really take into account, because a lot of people will read forums and spreadsheets and whatnot. But the one thing you have to realize is every fight is different. It's unique in a sense, so you have to take it, as it comes. So a lot of people need to really learn how to optimize their damage while moving. Sure. So like the only tools you have while moving as a Moonkin is Lunar Shower. And that is every time you hit Moonfire, your direct damage on Moonfire gets amplified. And that gets amplified, 3 different times up to like 100. Actually, I haven't really looked at the value lately, but I think it's like 145% or like 150% on the direct damage.
Nice. So
compared to, say, like a Warlock, the spell they can use while moving is Fell Flame. You take Mage, for example. Fire mages can use Scorch. They can also use their whole movement tier. But as a Moonkin, your asset while moving is Lunar Shower. So say like a fight is coming up where I have to move out of something for, say, like 3 to 5 seconds. I'm going to be making sure I'm in an Eclipse. And if there's a target not dotted, first I'm going to be dotting up that target and just spamming that Moonfire. So I'm going to like refresh my Eclipse dot on my main target, Moonfire, tab to the add, Moonfire as I'm running. And if I get any Star Surges, I'm going to be using Star Surges as I run too.
Gotcha.
So maximizing that damage while you're moving and planning it out, like just having the foresight during the fight is the biggest way to get an improvement on damage, which a lot of people don't realize. So you're either going to be picking another target to redot, or using Star Surges or refreshing your dots as you move and getting that extra Moonfire damage in.
Cool.
Jeez Louise. That's amazing. Holy cow. Yeah. Well, I got to ask, I mean, that's a lot to keep track of. I mean, there's a lot going on here. Are there any add-ons or anything that you recommend to kind of help players? Is there anything that you use to kind of help keep track of everything?
Yeah, I mean, it can be a lot, but it's all it's all practice, really. Like, it all just becomes second nature the more you play. I mean, that's like anything.
Sure.
But for anyone, it's getting a good dot timer and something to track your cooldowns. Like, I use Forte Exorcist, which is a really good dot tracker because it tracks your dots on previous targets. So you can use a lot of dot trackers which will only track what you're targeting, but Forte Exorcist is a really good one because, say, I have 4 targets dotted up, it'll keep track of all 4 of them on the side of my screen, so I can see when the first ones fall off, I can reapply them.
Oh, nice.
So that's one of the big things.
Right. Always remember to redot. Always. And maybe we should move into like some talents as far as for Boomkin go. We kind of touched on them a little bit, but what are those talents that boomies have to know about in order to, especially when it comes to DPS?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, right now, so on I think it's the 60 tier, the biggest one right now is pretty much your choice between Incarnation, Soul of the Forest, and Force of Nature. Right. A lot of people just opt out for Incarnation because it gives you one big, strong 3-minute cooldown, which is really great. But a lot of people don't really know that Force of Nature right now is actually really strong. In the previous tier, Force of Nature, which is Treants, which is those good old Treants that they still have with the class, were really weak. But this tier that just happened, they increased the damage a lot on them. and they scale off of haste and int. So when you use them, they snapshot your haste proc and your int or your spell power or any int procs. So ideally, if you pick those, it's going to be your highest single target, but that's only if it's a pure single target fight.
Right.
Or if that's your job is to do pure single target.
Right.
So I was even using Treants on Lei Shin to help push damage.
Mm-hmm.
And the best way to use them is like right when you get an Eclipse and you get that Nature's Grace, which gives you 15% haste, or like say a Trinket proc. I would use them right when I get the Trinket proc plus go into an Eclipse. And I don't know, it was just a gigantic boost to like single target damage.
That's awesome. I know that they boosted it for Resto as well, which is nice. That's what I play. So
yeah.
So
they also have more changes for that talent up and coming in the next major patch.
I know, and I'm so excited for it. As a Resto, Swift Mend with that.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be pretty cool.
That's going to be so awesome. Any other talents that Boomies need to know about?
Oh, yeah. The two other big ones are on your 90 tier.
Yep.
Which are, I mean, Dream of Sonaris isn't very good right now. It probably has its uses, but coming from a purely rating perspective, your only really two choices are Nature's Vigil and Heart of the Wild. So right now, I told you like Nature's Vigil, has a good use for Jin Rock, but in overall raw damage, Heart of the Wild is going to give you your biggest benefit at this point, which is just the 6% passive stats. So just the 6% to int, and is pretty much going to give you a gigantic boost in damage. It's going to be a few thousand actually over Nature's Vigil.
Wow.
But the biggest thing with Nature's Vigil is that it brings a lot of raid utility. It for the amount of damage you do, like 10% of that goes into healing people around you. Right. So what I wanted to do, and I'm pretty sure Method has done, because on their roster they have 3 Moonkin, is Nature's Vigil is a 1.5 minute cooldown. So if you're running 3 Moonkin with Nature's Vigil, you have a constant smart heal up on the raid the entire time. Right. So it actually has a lot of utility in a lot of the fights that have a lot of raid damage. Right now, we only have 2 Moonkin on our roster in Blood Legion, so it's kind of not been as big of an option as it has been for, say, like some of the other guilds. We did lose our 3rd Moonkin to school before this tier happened, so it really sucked, but, he's working more on that.
Right.
Well, I've got one at a 464 gear level, so if you need him,
yeah, just sign right.
That's right. I'm ready to go.
That's right. My Resto set is my Boom set as well, so I'm ready to go as well. Let's talk about glyphs, perchance. Let's talk about some of those glyphs that might be beneficial for Boomkin, for Moonkin.
All right, so, well, the one thing with the Druids is you don't really have many choices on glyphs.
Sure.
But the biggest one you're going to always want is that there's a glyph of the Moon Beast, which allows you to heal, while in Moonkin form. Mm-hmm. So that saves you using GCDs to swap out and heal like all the time. Because I know we use Moonkin Tranks, like Tranquilities, as big raid cooldowns for the majority of progression. So say like raid damage is really high, I can use Heart of the Wild, which amps my healing, for a little bit. Lets me pretty much be the every class like a Druid is.
Sure.
And I'll use Heart of the Wild and Trank, and that's pretty much almost as strong, like 90% strength of like a Resto Trank. Yep. So we use that and kind of time those in between like big cooldowns. Say like Dark Animus, a jolt goes off. I would use a Trank like right after that.
Right. Cool.
The other two glyphs. Yes. Yeah,
no, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, the other two choices you really have or don't have are pretty much for Stampeding Roar. Mm-hmm. You can use, I see there's 2 glyphs for Stampeding Roar that make the spell pretty much what I feel it should be. You can use one of the glyphs that make it so you can use it in any form, and then there's another glyph that makes it 40 yards. So a lot of times in the raids, we use a roar and it hits all 40 or people in 40 yards around me, and it's really, really big and detrimental for people to be moving out of stuff or getting where they need to at a certain point, especially on Lei Shin, because you pretty much have to run from one side of the platform to the other. So we time out my Stampeding Roar along with the other Moonkin Stampeding Roar at like crucial points.
Yep.
And that 40-yard range is gigantic.
Well, and it seems like a lot of the encounters right now are pretty heavy movement, especially at times where you really need to move quickly. So Stampede and Stampeding Roar are going to be awesome for pretty much any druid, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Being able to get your entire raid, like a 40% movement boost that stacks with pretty much everything else is really, really big in terms of, helping out with progression and having raid utility.
Gotcha. Any other glyphs that are especially useful for Moonkin?
Not really at this point. I mean,
Okay.
there is a new glyph coming out with a new PTR patch, which is called Glyph of Omens, which is probably going to be one of my other go-to glyphs if there's a fight where I don't need to help my raid with Stampeding Roar.
Mm-hmm.
Because the big thing is it makes all of your like CCs, your slows, like say Ursul's Vortex, Typhoon, Solar Beam, like all of those utility spells, they generate eclipse energy when you're outside of an eclipse. So you don't lose as much damage, using those utility spells. Say like if I drop Ursul's Vortex on some ads to keep them away from people, or I Typhoon stuff because, we're using the pushback for something, interrupt something, I'm still gaining eclipse energy. So I'm not really losing that much damage, and I'm still keeping pace with the whole marriage of lunar and solar eclipse going back and forth.
Very cool. Well, one thing that we haven't talked about yet are stats. I guess we talked a little bit about it, but let's talk about stats as they stand right now in 5.2. What are you stacking? What are you ignoring? What's going on?
Yeah, so the biggest change with this whole expansion was one passive that you have called Shooting Stars on Moonkin. Okay. Back in Cataclysm, Shooting Stars was just a passive that on dot tick you had a chance to proc Shooting Stars. In Mist of Pandaria, they changed that to on dot crit, and that one passive, as well as a couple other changes, made it so the class basically at this point is just stacking crit. Like you're just going as much crit as you can. Last tier 14 set with a 4-piece, I mean, people did go up to some haste caps, which just increased, your dot tick frequency. So you gain an extra dot tick. But for the most part now in tier 15, you're just going full crit. And then your next secondary that's better under that is haste. Mastery is kind of on the wayside.
Okay.
Pretty much because you have the Shooting Stars, which is on dot crit. So your dots have to crit in order for you to get Star Surge procs.
Right.
And then the other big thing too is every time your direct damage spells crit, they extend your dots as well. So say I crit with the Star Surge, like right now on my Moonkin, I have like 40% crit.
Wow.
So with the new tier 15 4 set, my Star Surge has a 50% crit. So pretty much half the time my Star Surge hits the boss, it's extending both of my dots on the boss by an extra like second and a half.
Nice.
Jeez, that's awesome. Well, I'm curious too. So in regards to gemming, when you're saying crit, so we're talking yellow gems or yellow sockets, you're going just straight crit gems, that kind of deal?
Yeah, at this point, yeah. Because one of the other changes in MOP was that they made rating gems two times as high as int gems or main stat gems. So that was the biggest thing, is a lot of people are gemming just pure rating in this expansion, and a lot of people might not understand that or get that, but most classes just gem pure ratings because of that change in how gemming works.
Right. So like in a red socket, then you're doing int and crit, not just straight int.
Yeah, you would just do int and crit because you're getting, like 160 of that crit rating. So you're getting a lot more out of that for a lot of the stats. Because it would have to be 2 times as much.
Right. I mean, that completely changed. It's so funny. This new system now, the secondary stats are more important than int. I mean, we used to always gem int, and now we're gemming all these secondary stats. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty much because it's like, 1 point of int would have to be 2 times as high as 1 point of crit because you're getting 2 times the crit from one gem. So a lot of that, like, mathematically just, if you can use the rating, you use it. I know that there are still some classes, I think, like, most Death Knights just gem pure strength. So, I mean, there are some classes who stick to the old ways, but for the most part, it's just pure rating gemming.
Cool.
Right.
Cool. Anything else, fellas, from you guys as far as questions on boomers?
Boy, that seems to cover a good chunk of it.
We covered a lot in a very little amount of time, so that's good. That's good. So now what is up with you this? As far as this week goes here, Zoomkins, what's your schedule like? I mean, it's got to be still crazy, right? As far as rating,
I guess like since a lot of people do work, like our rating roster is a lot smaller than a lot of people would think.
Okay.
Like I think we only have maybe lower 30s going into this tier.
Oh wow.
Of raiders. So we pretty much need everyone around when we have to. So, people took time off earlier in the progression race, but now it's pretty much, if like our main tank can't be back, because he's working, we can't start till later in the day. Or if someone, has classes on this day, we need the specific comp that we need for Lei Shen. We can't sit there and, sub people in and out at this point.
Sure.
So we are starting like later than usual. Trying to work around these schedules.
Cool.
Well, I hope you guys get them down so that way you get some sleep.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Good luck as you progress. And where can people find you? I know that you have a Twitch channel when you're not in progress, right? So
yep.
What is your Twitch channel?
My Twitch channel is just twitch.tv/ZoomkinsBL.
Okay. And where else can people reach you if they need to get a hold of you? You also have
there, and I also have the Twitter, which is the same thing, just Twitter, and then ZoomkinsBL. And I'm pretty active on my Twitter, and I will be back to being really active on my stream page once progression is over. I usually go on there, like every Tuesday through Thursday, and do our main week clear, and then just random stuff on the weekend sometimes.
And it looks like your YouTube channel is youtube.com/IMALIVEX.
I'm Alive X.
Right.
Yeah, that one I had made a lot earlier, and it's a lot harder to change YouTube names than it is Twitch names. So I've just kind of kept that one because a lot of my videos are already uploaded there.
Right on. Well, we appreciate your time for sure. Thank you very much for coming on the show and talking a little bit about boomers with us. Enlightening for sure. And lots of stuff going on. So good stuff.
Awesome stuff.
Any other things that you want to tell aspiring Moonkin out there?
Not entirely that I can think of, but just, I don't know. A lot of your damage comes from gear while playing, so don't be discouraged. A lot of people think that, it's their class or their spec that sucks or whatever. But a lot of times your gear is going to be your biggest DPS boost. So, sitting there and sticking it through till you get more gear in your guild or your raid is pretty much, what you have to wait and watch out for.
Right. And I saw your I saw the armory thing for you, and you're sitting at about an item level of about 530 or something like that. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's insane, man.
That's crazy. Well, thank you again for coming on. I'll give you the big applause. There we go. Zoomkins from Blood Legion, awesome to talk to you, sir. And you have a great day, and we wish you and your team all the best as you progress.
Thank you. And I think I'm going to go head over to my dad's and go have an Easter dinner.
There you go. There you go.
Right.
Happy Easter.
Thanks. Happy Easter to you guys, too.
All right, talk to you.
Thanks for coming, man.
Hopefully we'll talk to you soon.
All right, take it easy.
Bye.
Bye.